Hello viewers, welcome to Literary Concepts. Today's topic is Old English period, so which is also called as Anglo-Saxon period. Now let us try to understand the Old English period. Introduction part. The Old English period, which was started in 450 AD to 1066 AD, represents the earliest phase of English language and literature. So, this Old English period is a beginning phase, the earliest, very, very earliest primary phase of English language and literature. So, it encompasses so it includes the time from the initial settlement of the Anglo-Saxons. So the Anglo-Saxons in Britain to the end of the 11th century, marked by significant socio-political and linguistic changes, including the Norman conquest of 1066. So it includes from the beginning, okay, the initial settlement of the Anglo-Saxon tribes in Britain from there to the end of the 11th century. So where that we find during this time various significant changes like socio-political and linguistic changes we find during this period. So including we also find this Norman conquest event which was happened in 1066. So this period is also called Anglo-Saxon period. Why this Old English period is also called Anglo-Saxon period means invasion of Celtic England. So England was invaded, okay, conquered, captured by Germanic tribes. The Germanic tribes are Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. These tribes came and invaded and captured England in the first half of the 5th century. From there to the conquest of England in 1066 by the Norman French. So the French people, under the leadership of William the Conqueror, so they came and captured and invaded England in 1066. So this is what happened during Old English period. The present name of English comes from that Angles. Okay, from that name of Angles, the present English name derived. So this is about the beginning, the introduction part of Old English period. Now let us try to understand the characteristics of Old English period. The first characteristic is heroic tradition. The first feature is heroic tradition. A significant portion of Old English literature. So, the Old English literature, the majority portion of Old English literature is heroic in nature. So, that is the brave and courageous act we find in nature celebrating warrior culture, loyalty, and the code of honor. So in Old English period, whatever the poetry, okay, the writings happened. So in those writings and poems, we find heroic in nature and celebrating of warrior culture and loyalty and the code of honor. Even this comitatus, okay, comitatus theme is also occurred. So that means the bond of loyalty between a leader and their warriors is a recurring theme. Comitatus means the bond, okay, that relationship between a leader and their warriors. So that recurs oftenly we find more in Old English during Old English period writings. The second feature is oral tradition. Stories were initially passed down orally by scopes, that is, poet singers, who used techniques like alliteration, repetition, formulaic phrases, understand, to aid memorization. So, whatever the stories were there, So those stories were passed down orally by poet singers. Understand? So they pass it down orally to the other generations, just like using certain techniques like alliteration. So that is, alliteration means occurrence of the same letter or sound. Okay, repetition of the same letter or sound, and then repetition and form-like phrases, certain kind of formula or okay a style, different styles of phrases are used to memorization, to remember the things. So that is the second characteristics of old English period. And the third feature or characteristic is Christian influence. The introduction of Christianity brought a shift in themes. In Old English literature, we find that so the introduction of Christianity brought a lot of shift in themes, with many texts focusing on religious instruction, biblical stories, and lives of saints. We find the many texts, the works in Old English literature, okay, focusing more, giving prominence to religious instruction, religious teachings, and biblical stories. So the stories related to Bible and the lives of saints, understand the holy people, monks, about them. So we find Christian influence in Old English literature. Okay, and then the next characteristic is pagan element. So a pagan means basically so a person holding religious beliefs other than those of main religions, a kind of atheists. So these people, they believe only in their own particular religions, rather than they don't believe in main religions like Christianity, Islam, okay, Jainism. So in these religions, these people, they don't believe, they have their own set of beliefs. Understand? So therefore, despite Christianization, okay, Christianization, many works retain traces of pagan beliefs such as fate, veneration of nature, and portrayal of supernatural beings. So that is, people hear that they believe in fate, and then the veneration respecting nature, and the portrayal, the depiction of supernatural elements in their works. Understand? So that is the fourth element, that is the fourth feature, that is pagan element. The next feature is alliterative words. Old English poetry is defined by its use of alliteration. We find more this figure of speech, alliteration. So that is occurrence of the same letter or sound in the beginning of each word. So, rather than rhyme, so we find more alliteration in Old English poetry. So, with lines divided into two halves by a caesura. Understand? That is, caesura means a pause. So, with the lines divided into two halves. Each line is divided into two parts with a break, with a pause. That is caesura. Understand? So we find more alliterative words in Old English poetry. And then we find the next feature is themes of exile and loss. So the themes of separation and the loss we find in Old English literature. Many poems reflect the themes of loneliness, exile, understand, and the transience of life, reflecting the harsh realities of the period. So many poems in Old English literature, we find these themes, that loneliness and then exile means the separation, banishment, understand, excommunicating, and the transience of life. So that is the briefness, the temporariness of life we find, and reflecting the harsh, the realities of the period. The next feature is elegiac tone. So elegiac tone means elegy related tone, that is sad tone we find in Old English poems. A sense of melancholy and reflection of mortality is common in much of the surviving poetry. In whatever the poems we have, we find that melancholy, that sadness, sorrowness, understand the desolation, and the reflection of mortality, understand that impermanence. These are the common themes, that common tone which we find in whatever the poetry which were surviving during that Old English period. And the next feature is, that is characteristic, is manuscript culture. So manuscript means handwritten, okay, texts. Manuscript means handwritten texts. So the texts were written by monks. These manuscripts were written by uh, monks, different, okay, people, those who belong to different religions, preserved in manuscripts. So different manuscripts are preserved, such as the Junius manuscript. These are very, very important for net examination purpose. The Beowulf manuscript, the Vercelli book, and the Exeter book. So these are the characteristics which we find in Old English literature, Old English period. Next, the major works and writers. Let us try to understand the major works and writers. The first work is Beowulf. This is very popular. This is the most Old English epic poem, famous Old English epic poem, that is Beowulf, which tells the story of a eponymous, okay, eponymous hero. That is the title itself is the name of the hero in the story, that is Beowulf, who battles the monster Grendel, okay, who fights with the monster, that devil, with Grendel and Grendel's mother and a dragon in his later years. Understand? So here in Beowulf, we find the themes like heroism, loyalty, fate, and the struggle between good and evil. These themes we find in this work, Beowulf, and it is the earliest surviving epic in English literature. So this is most, okay, one of the most famous earliest surviving epic in English literature, and provides insights into the deep understanding of the culture and values of Anglo-Saxon period. Understand this Beowulf epic provides the deeper understanding. We can understand the culture and values of Anglo-Saxons. Understand? So that is the first work. Then the next work is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. The next one is Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. These are a collection of annals. So that is a collection of historical records. Annals means historical records. Chronicling, so that is recording a document, the history of England. So this Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is a record of about the history of England from Roman period to 12th century. So, in this chronicle, we find the historical events which happened, and the battles and the lives of rulers. We find in Anglo-Saxon chronicles. Anglo-Saxon chronicles. And then the significance. So, it is a valuable historical record. Anglo-Saxon chronicle is a valuable historical record and one of the first examples of prose in Old English period. So this is Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is the first example of prose. Then the next third one is the dream of Rude. So Rude means this is crucifix, or that is a cross which we see in Christianity. Okay, the Jesus Christ which he carries, that cross symbol. Rood means that is cross. Okay, so here this is the dream of Rood is a Christian poem depicting a visionary dream in which the cross, that is Rood, speaks about the Christ's crucifixion. So it is a visionary dream. It is a poem, okay, Christian poem. So where that a visionary dream, in that dream that the cross speaks about the Christ's crucifixion. Understand? That is, crucifixion means you find that in Christianity, the Jesus Christ is nailed or bound to a cross. Understand? And the themes which we see that is sacrifice, redemption, and blending of heroic and Christian ideals. In this poem, we find that sacrifice, okay, and then redemption, okay, free from all sins and blending of heroic and Christian ideals. So the Christian morals, understand, and it is a masterpiece of religious poetry during the Old English period, blending pagan and Christian imagery. We find that pagan and Christian imagery in this poem. And then the next work is Wanderer. The next work is Wanderer. It is an elegiac poem about a lone warrior reflecting on loss and exile, and the impermanence of life. Wanderer means a traveler. So this is a kind of sad poem about a lone warrior, a single warrior. So his thoughts on loss and exile, so that is banishment, understand, that is separation and impermanence, the shortness of life. The themes which we find in this Wanderer poem is exile, fate, and the search for solace, search for relief, consolation. And it is a poignant exploration, understand, it is a poignant exploration of human suffering and resilience. So that is poignant means, so it is a pitiful, a sad and affecting exploration, okay, so of human suffering and resilience. So that is the capacity to withstand all the difficulties which we face in life. So these are the important works, and one more is the Seafarer. It is another elegiac poem. It recounts the hardships of life at sea and the speaker's spiritual journey. We find that the difficulties faced, okay, of a life at sea in the ocean and the speaker's spiritual journey. The themes which we find in Seafarer is isolation, faith, and transient. Understand the temporariness of the nature of earthly life, and this is a vivid depiction of tension between worldly struggle and spiritual longing. Understand? So it is a graphic representation of the realistic depiction, description of that worldly struggles, whatever that we uh, face, the struggles we encounter in our day-to-day life, and then spiritual longing, the spiritual desire. So these things we find in Seafarer poem. Then next we find the B-Day. Okay, the writer, understand. So his work is the ecclesiastical history of English people. So originally written in Latin, and Bede is also known as the Venerable Bede. So Bede is also known as the Venerable Bede. Was a monk. He was a monk and scholar whose historical and theological writings shaped the understanding of early English history and Christianity. So Bede is also his famous work is the ecclesiastical history of English people, and he is very well known as the Venerable Bede, and he was a monk and a scholar, and he wrote historical and theological writings, so which shaped the early English history and Christianity. Understand? The next writer is Cadman. Cadman's uh, work is Cadman's Hymn. So this Cadman's Hymn is the first recorded poem in English. So it is the first recorded poem in English and attributed to Cadman. So he was a shepherd who, according to legend, was inspired by divine intervention to compose poetry. So he was a shepherd. Cadman was a shepherd. Okay, so who was inspired by divine intervention, so godly intervention to compose poetry. Understand? That is Cadman. Then Kenny Kenny Wolf. So Kenny Wolf works Christ 2, Ellen, Juliana, The Fates of Apostle. These are the famous poems, okay, works of Kenny Wolf. And he was a Christian poet known for his religious and didactic works, often signed with runic inscriptions. That is, runic means mystical, magical inscriptions. So he was a Christian poet. So these are the Christ 2, Ellen, Juliana, the Fates of Apostles are the important works by Kinney. Manuscripts preserving Old English literature. Okay, the different manuscripts which are very, very important for preserving Old English literature. These are number one is the Beowulf manuscript. So that Beowulf manuscript is also called Novel Codex. So that is also called Novel Codex. So which contains Beowulf and other texts like Judith. In this manuscript, we find the Beowulf epic and the other works like Judith. The next manuscript is the Exeter Book, a major anthology, a collection of poems of English, okay, a major anthology of Old English poetry, so which includes The Wanderer, The Seafarer, and The Wife's Lament. So these important poems which we find in the Exeter book. Then the third manuscript is the Junius manuscript. So it is also a collection of biblical poetry. So the poems written basis on the Bible. So which includes the Junius manuscript includes Genesis, Exodus, and Daniel. So these important poems are included in Junius manuscript. The fourth manuscript is the Vercelli book, which includes the religious texts like the Dream of Rood and other homilies, so moral lectures and moral speeches. Okay, these are the very, very important manuscripts which we find in Old English literature. So I hope you understand the Old English period concept. Thank you, everyone.